Hello everybody, Mobius1 here, bringing you episode 6 of my Star Wars Unlimited Shadows of the Galaxy card set review series. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of cards that were revealed to us back in early May, and I do just want to give a quick reminder that although by the time this video makes it public on YouTube, the entire Shadows of the Galaxy card set has pretty much been revealed to us already, I am reviewing these cards within the context of how they were when they were first revealed. This means I'm only comparing them to cards that were shown to us previously. I totally recognize that as more cards were revealed, the power level of certain cards may change. So when we finally get through all of the cards, I will, at the end of this series, do a kind of recap where we go back and reevaluate some of the earlier cards with the full set as context. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I do all sorts of Star Wars gaming content with a heavy focus on Star Wars Unlimited at this time. I will be doing a playthrough of Star Wars Outlaws once that comes out in August. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, or you just want to watch more Star Wars Unlimited content, please subscribe. But with that out of the way, let's check out these cards. First card we're taking a look at in this episode is a new leader, Bossk. Bossk is a red-black leader with the action to exhaust him and deal 1 damage to a unit with bounty, and you may give it +1/+0 for this phase. It is interesting that it can be used to either damage opponents' units that have bounties on them or your own, and if you do damage your own, you can give them a +1 power buff. But then, on 5 resources, Bossk deploys to a 4/6 stat line with the text, "When you collect a bounty, you may collect that bounty again. Use this ability only once each round." I think that's quite strong. Currently, the only red-black leaders we have are IG-88 and Grand Inquisitor, and his body is a little bit more comparable to Grand Inquisitor, although Bossk does deploy 1 resource earlier. And while Bossk doesn't have the on-attack ability that Grand Inquisitor has, his bounty collecting ability is going to be really interesting once we start seeing more of the bounty cards that are going to be coming in Shadows of the Galaxy. Now, up to this point, the only bounty card that's been revealed is Wanted, which, if collected with Bossk, would allow you to ready up to 4 friendly resources, which is a huge swing. But don't forget, there are also cards that just have bounty built into the card, such as Cartel Turncoat. So if your opponent plays a Cartel Turncoat while you have Bossk deployed and you defeat it, you'll get to draw 2 cards. And while we haven't seen any red or black bounty cards yet, we do also have the Covetous Rivals that have been revealed, which is a 6-cost 5/5, has grit, and then when played and on attack, you may deal 2 damage to a unit with bounty. So if a Bossk bounty deck is going to exist, I think Covetous Rivals actually could fit into that. I just imagine maybe your opponent having 2 units that you've put bounties on, and with 5 resources, you deploy Bossk, attack into something, defeat it, collect the bounty, and then on the following turn, maybe with 6 resources now, you play Covetous Rivals, and you get to do a 2 damage ping to a unit with bounty and finish them off with Bossk and collect double that bounty. That does kind of sound like a pretty niche scenario, so I'm not sure how often something like that could be set up. But if it turns out it's not too hard to manipulate the board into that kind of situation, then I think you got a strong combo there. Either way, I think Bossk is already a fairly strong red-black leader, and as we see more of the bounty cards in the set revealed, his power level is only going to go up. And speaking of cards that synergize off of bounties, we now have Chaincode Collector, who is a 4-cost 4/2 with Ambush, and on attack, if the defender has a bounty, it gets -4/-0 for this attack. I think that's really strong, because again, if you just take a look at Wanted, that means on turn 3, when you've got 4 resources, if your opponent plays something with 4 or less HP, which will probably be the case, you can, for 0 resources, play Wanted. Then on your next action, play Chaincode Collector for 4, ambush that unit, Chaincode Collector will finish it off, and you'll get 2 resources back from Wanted to play something else. And while Chaincode Collector's 2 HP is pretty bad for a 4-cost card, the fact that it's going to come into play and remove something immediately, and then if that target had a bounty, probably stick around and be a lingering threat that your opponent has to deal with, is significant. We do already have a couple 4-cost ambush cards, but I think a more comparable card to Chaincode Collector would be Syndicate Lackeys. There have been some cunning decks out there that run Syndicate Lackeys simply as another form of quick removal. And yes, the 5/4 stat line is definitely better than Chainco Collector's 4/2, but the fact that Chainco Collector is cheaper and has a really, really strong synergy with bounties, I think if you're going to be running any bounty cards in your deck, then Chainco Collector is an awesome inclusion. And don't sleep on the fact that Chainco Collector has both the Underworld and Bounty Hunter traits. We've already seen some cards that synergize off of one or either of those keywords, and we're probably going to see more, such as Fennec Shand. Fennec Shand is a 7-cost 4/6 cunning unit, again with ambush. However, she has on attack deal 1 damage to the defender if it's a unit for each different cost among cards in your discard pile. Now this is really cool because we haven't had cards in Star Wars Unlimited that really reference the contents of your discard pile yet. Yes, we have had cards like Rogue Squadron Skirmisher that have abilities that let you return cards from your discard pile either to your hand or in play. But as far as like looking at the overall contents of your discard pile and making a decision based on that alone, Fennec Shand is the first of its kind. The closest we have to Fennec right now is Han Solo, who's also a 7-cost cunning unit with ambush. And while Han Solo does have more going for him, in other words, he's a 6/6 instead of a 4/6, and more importantly, his ability that while attacking, he deals combat damage before the defender. Don't get me wrong, huge benefit over Fennec Shand. He does also have the heroism aspect requirement, whereas Fennec Shand can be put into any cunning deck. And I would wager that by the time you play Fennec Shand for 7 resources, your discard pile will probably have at least 2, if not 3 or more different costed cards in it, making her a 6 or even 7/6 ambush. And why is that important? It turns out 7 damage is enough to one-shot a lot of leaders in Star Wars Unlimited. Being able to drop an ambush card out of nowhere and take your opponent by complete surprise by removing their leader in one action is a really good play. Fennec does lose a few points when you realize her ability only works when she attacks, which means, yes, she'll be ambushing and attacking the moment you play her, but if she survives that attack and your opponent retaliates by attacking her, she'll only be dealing 4 damage in return. I think in the right deck, Fennec Shand could be really powerful, but I'm afraid her 7 resource cost might be a little bit too high for her to see a lot of play. A card that I do think will see a lot of play, however, is Wrecker, the 6-cost 7/6 Overwhelm, and when played, you may defeat a friendly resource. If you do, deal 5 damage to a ground unit. This card is nuts. Honestly, there's so many things to talk about with this card. A 6-cost 7/6 with Overwhelm is amazing. In Spark of Rebellion, we already have a TST, which is a 6-cost 6/7 with Overwhelm, which doesn't really see much play, but I don't think that's because it's a bad card. I think that's just because there are better cards to be running in villainy decks. But holy cow, is Wrecker the perfect card to fit into your red-white aggro Sabine decks. Green Sabine has been one of the most oppressive aggro decks since the game launched, using Energy Conversion Lab to get 6 or less costed units into play with ambush. Well, Wrecker costs 6, so can you imagine Energy Conversion Labbing Wrecker into play, getting to ambush something for 7 damage with Overwhelm, and then using his When Played ability to defeat one of your resources and deal 5 damage to another ground target? That's what you call a swing play. Green Sabine already runs Steadfast Battalion for pretty much that exact reason. And while Steadfast Battalion only costs 5, you only get him as a 5/5 unless you have your leader deployed, in which case he can buff himself up to a 7/7, but then at the end of the phase it goes back to a 5/5. With Wrecker, you don't have to worry about meeting any of those conditions. The 7/6 body is just that. And if you're worried about the cost, a lot of Sabine decks already run Guerrilla Attack Pod anyway, and yes, that's mostly for its When Played ability to come into play ready, but because Wrecker also has a When Played ability that will impact the board the round that you play him, I think that makes him fast enough to include in the deck. And just because he's a bad batch character, we'll bring up Hunter. I don't really think that Wrecker helps a all bad batch character Hunter leader deck really viable, but if there's going to be one bad batch character you want to run, it's most likely going to be Wrecker. Speaking of bad batch, we've got Echo, a 4-cost 4/4 with Restore 2, and when played, you may discard a card from your hand, Give 2 experience tokens to a unit in play with the same name as the discarded card. So many heroism decks right now are running Wing Leader, so we know the ability to give 2 experience tokens to another unit is a pretty strong effect. So putting a fairly statted body and the Restore 2 effect on it should make it a really good card, right? You see, Wing Leader's only requirements of putting 2 experience tokens on a unit is that they're Rebel, and you can build your deck around that by just including Rebel units. Echo's conditions require you to not only discard a card from your hand, but also the name of the card you're discarding has to match the name of the card that you want to buff. And I haven't done the math on it, but the fact that you can only have 3 copies of a card in your deck, I don't think the odds of that happening are incredibly high. Now, the Restore 2 does make him a little bit better, but did you guys even know we already have a 4-cost unit in Spark of Rebellion that has Restore 2 with Regional Sympathizers? Yeah, it's only a 3/4, but this card doesn't see any play at all. I think people are going to try to include Echo in decks and ultimately come to the realization he just isn't quite strong enough to make the cut this set. But that being said, since we know set 3 is titled Twilight of the Republic, I imagine we'll be getting more clone synergy cards in that set, and if that's the case, Echo could make a comeback. Next up, we have Death Watch Loyalist, a 3-cost red-black 3/3 Mandalorian with Grit and Overwhelm. Grit and Overwhelm seem like a lot for a 3-cost unit, and believe it or not, the only 3-cost red-black unit in Spark of Rebellion is Fifth Brother. So Deathwatch Loyalist is already filling a pretty niche spot. The problem is Fifth Brother has that elusive Force trait that we know is so good, and Deathwatch Loyalist, while being a 3-cost red-black unit, is only a Mandalorian, and we haven't seen a whole lot of dark side Mandalorian synergies in the set yet. I can see a potential combo here where if you're playing like a red, black, blue deck, you have Deathwatch Loyalist on the board and you play Death Trooper. You can use Death Troopers when played to deal 2 damage to the Deathwatch Loyalist and then 2 damage to an enemy ground unit. Then you have a 5/1 with Overwhelm Deathwatch Loyalist. That kind of sounds more like a cheeky play to me than something that you'd really want to do. Really, I think we need to hold out and wait and see what other red, black, or just black in general Mandalorian synergies we're going to get, because we do have Clan Challengers, which is just a red aspect requirement Mandalorian unit that also has Overwhelm and has Raid 3. And I think Clan Challengers is going to be seeing a lot of play in Mandalorian decks. So if you're running a red-black deck and you're trying to cram as many Mandalorians into it, Deathwatch Loyalist may be just the card you're looking for. But as of now, I think it's pretty average. A red Mandalorian card that I don't think is very average is Koska Reeves, who is a 4-cost red-white Mandalorian, 4/5, and on attack, if this unit is upgraded, you may deal 2 damage to a ground unit. That is so much better than Deathwatch Loyalist for only 1 more resource. The 4/5 stat line for 4 resources is already great value. Red-white decks are already playing 3 K2SOs in pretty much every deck. And yes, K2SO has Overwhelm and a really powerful when defeated effect, but I think it's going to be really easy to buff Koska Reeves up using cheap upgrades such as Hotshot DL44 Blaster, which makes her a 6/5 with on attack deal 2 damage to a ground unit. That 2 damage ping is going to go a huge way to controlling the board, especially if you're running Bo-Katan as your leader. Attacking with Koska, doing 2 damage to something, and then using Bo-Katan's ability to ping something else for 1 damage, or ping the same target for a total of 3, you're going to be playing a very aggressive deck that has no problem controlling the board too. You know, already you start the game off by playing Ketsu Onyo, who's a 2-cost Mandalorian, and then the turn after Koska comes out, you can play Clan Challengers for 5. I mean, I'm serious. This red, white, and probably blue Bo-Katan deck is going to be pretty crazy. I think Koska is super powerful, and I can't wait to run her in all of my Heroism Mando decks. And we'll close this video out with Ruthlessness, which is a 1-cost red-black upgrade. Attached unit gets when this unit attacks and defeats a unit, deal 2 damage to the defending player's base. We've been talking about Clan Challengers all episode, so why not wrap things up with them as well? It is a little unfortunate that Ruthlessness is red-black, and the card we were just looking at, Koska Reeves, is red-white, so you probably won't be playing them together, but because Clan Challengers only has the red aspect requirement and not Heroism or Villainy, Ruthlessness fits right in with them. This ultimately makes Clan Challengers a 6-cost 5/6 with Raid 3 and Overwhelm. So while they attack, they're going to be attacking for 8, and any excess damage they do to an enemy unit will be carried over to the base, plus 2 because of the effect of Ruthlessness. I gotta be honest, I really don't think Ruthlessness is a great card, but in the very specific case of Ruthlessness on Clan Challengers, I think it becomes a great card. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it also pairs really well with Entrenched. If you're going to be playing Ruthlessness, you're going to want to be playing it on something that is attacking enemy units. So I guess if you entrench something, give it a bunch of HP, then throw Ruthlessness on there, and if it has Overwhelm on top of that, like a Clan Challengers with Entrenched and Ruthlessness is just... That shuts down the ground arena. At least until your opponent plays Vanquish and just gets rid of the whole thing in one play. But yeah, Ruthlessness seems like it could be okay. Probably might fit into some red-black decks, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's overlooked for more powerful cards. And that's it for this episode. When I started this series, I really had high hopes of getting through the entire Shadows of the Galaxy set before the set actually released, and now it's more clear than ever that that ain't gonna happen. But I'm gonna continue making this series because, as I said in the last episode, making this has been really fun for me. It's been something I've wanted to do for a while. I hope you guys continue to watch and enjoy. Please share your thoughts on what your favorite card is in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, why not leave a like? It helps me, helps the channel grow a little bit, and keep an eye out for the next episode, which should be coming pretty soon. But that's it for now. Thank you all for watching. Mobius1 here, and I'll see you in the next one.